Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the September lineup. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today we have a first timer here on the show. She is a fiction book editor specializing in developmental editing, line editing, and copy editing services for self publishing and traditional publishing authors. She has edited over 500 books, several of which have won awards and topped Amazon's bestsellers list with astonishing qualifications, an impressive portfolio, and a flawless mastery of the complexities of the English language. My guest has become a reputable manuscript editor for first time and veteran authors. And to tell us more about her services and how she got into the business and the industry, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, editor Kristen Hamilton. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I'm actually kind of embarrassed after that introduction you did. So thank you. Thank you for that. It sounds good. It sounds good though. So thank you.
You're welcome. So before we dive into the questions, Kristen, is there anything else you'd like to add about your background as a fiction editor?
No, actually that really covers it. So I started in 2012. So I've been going for 14 years now. And yeah, it's been a really fun ride. It's been a really awesome experience. I love my job so much, and that has impacted every single aspect of my life. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you about that.
Awesome. Well, let's just dive right into the first question. So, typically, what types of novels have you worked on? And is there a project that still fascinates you?
I typically work on fiction, everything under fiction. A lot of other editors have kind of like pigeonholed themselves into specific subgenres under the fiction umbrella.
Mm,
Mystery, thriller, women's fiction, romance, all those different genres.
right.
I I work on everything. I work on everything, and it really keeps things fresh.
Hmm,
One week I could be working on um, a huge an epic fantasy novel, and at the same time be working on a suspense novel. So it really keeps everything fresh. I'm constantly working on new projects every single week. As far as the project that still fascinates me, that's actually a really good question. It's hard to answer though, because I have
mm,
edited so many books that, oh gosh, I would say every single time that I get a book that I've edited in the mail, and I open it up and get to hold the paperback version in my hands for the first time. Look through it, be able to see. The author usually signs
right.
it and writes a personal note in it. That to me, that moment, every single time without fail, is like, oh my gosh, this is the best book ever. So it's
Nice.
hard to answer. Yeah, so it's hard to answer that question. What book still fascinates me, because it's constantly changing.
I would imagine so, and especially editing over like 500 books, you've probably read like incredible stories that pretty much like either subverted your expectations or really like gave you like a twist that you never expected. And I can't imagine like the hours of dedication to multiple projects to make sure each one gets the quality time that it deserves.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, editing is such an intensive and invasive process.
Hmm.
Obviously, on what the book needs, what the author wants done with their
Right.
book. I do everything from just really basic copy editing, which is just looking at surface level issues like typos,
Mm,
and all the way to developmental editing and manuscript critique, where I'm
right.
looking at the overall story, I'm analyzing
Right.
everything, I'm looking for plot holes, inconsistencies. There's
Hmm.
a gamut of things that I am looking for when I'm editing books, and it's very labor intensive. Yeah.
Man, oh man. So you gave a little teaser to this in the beginning, but I'm curious, when did you decided that being an editor was something that you wanted to be your aha moment? And how long before you figured out that this was something that you wanted to pursue and make a career out of it and make your own business?
So I was originally going to college for a degree in English and writing.
Mm,
My my original goal was I wanted to work for like the newspaper, maybe a journalist, something like that. And in my last semester of college, I was part of a workshop class where everyone in the class wrote a short story.
right.
And every single week, one person would bring their story in, and everybody else in the class would edit that story and give feedback.
Mm,
And so it was really my first, experience editing, real world editing. And I
right.
totally fell in love with it. I totally fell in love with it. And I knew then, like, okay, this is pretty cool, you know. Um, so yeah, it was actually before I got out of college, I knew exactly, what I wanted to do. A little bit different circumstances that actually put me in that job. I
Mm.
was working I was working still in college. I was working for a car dealership.
Ah, okay.
Was writing the descriptions for the vehicles, so check out this 2012, Mustang. It's super souped up and, has a throaty purr, all those descriptions. Knows. It was fun, but
Right.
I got laid off.
Oh,
And so I came home from, you know, my job that I no longer had, totally devastated. My husband gave me this book called Freelancing for Dummies. And I was
hmm.
okay, so I sat on the couch. I literally had nothing to do. And I read this book. And so I got fired. I got laid off on a Friday, and then by Sunday I had decided, okay, I'm going to do this, and I started my business. And it
Right.
literally just it took off. It totally took off. Um, I loved I loved everything about it. Editing books, interacting with authors, managing my business.
Mm-hmm.
It it I was hooked, and that was 14 years ago, and I was still going.
Awesome. And that actually leads perfectly into the next set of questions. So, when you're working with a client for the first time, what is sort of like the need or desire you want to satisfy for our clients, especially first time authors who are hesitant of working with an editor for the first time? Because, from personal experience, it is in sense, an intimidating feeling because you don't know if this editor is going to respect, the story that you've had or the way the story's written and other elements that you've worked really hard on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there are so many times throughout my career that I have, an author has reached out to me saying, "Hey, in nicer words, they will essentially say, "Hey, the last editor I hired ended up scamming me, just
Mm,
taking me and not really doing any work on my book and just disappearing." Um,
right.
how do I know that you're not going to do the same thing to me? um and it's it makes me really mad, to see that there are other, not even editors, scammers out there, and
Right.
then posing as editors, because it's like, this is, apart from the money, this is somebody's book. This is
Right.
somebody's baby. They spent so much time researching and writing and imagining the characters.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, it's just so it's tough. Yeah, so it's tough to hear that from authors. So when authors approach me for book editing, my main goal, especially with first time authors, is to make sure that they know that their book is safe with me.
Right.
You know, I'm the real deal, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
um, I I am here to help them take their book from their first draft, third draft, whatever draft they're working on. Hopefully, it's been self-edited. Hopefully, they've like spent some time polishing it on their
Right.
own.
Right.
Um, but taking their best version and making it even better to the point that it's ready for publication and that it will get good reviews.
Nice. So ultimately, you would say that is your promise that you're making to the clients that you are working with.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially I am here to help them publish their best book.
Nice. And now I'm actually curious for this next question. So when you began this journey, when you began this job as an editor, do you remember the first project you worked on? What was that experience like? And also, what was the initial reaction from the client? Was it positive, mixed, or was it bad? And also from friends and family, what was their initial reaction when you told them, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life?
So my 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 mom didn't really believe in me. She thought it was cool. She thought it was a neat idea, but she was concerned. And this is 12 years ago, so I don't know if I'm remembering
Right.
this right. But my yeah, so my mom was kind of concerned that my it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't
Right.
hold. So she was concerned, and she wanted me to get a real job, quote unquote,
Right.
which I can understand.
Mhm.
Um, but we had friends of my parents. He does freelance. He does freelance writing, and so she put me
Right.
in touch with him, and he kind of gave me some pointers and stuff. And so that was all right. As far as the first client I had, the feedback has always been very positive, like surprisingly positive. Of course, there have been some, hiccups along the way. Like
Of
really
course.
early on in my career, I was really bad with sticking to my deadlines. And
Mm.
one day I realized, after, telling the author, hey, I'm not going to be able to get your manuscript to you on time as I had originally promised. I'm sorry. And then the author wrote back, hey, no problem. It's okay. But even so, it made me feel like icky inside,
Mm.
making that promise with the deadline and then not meeting it.
Right.
So then I decided really early on in my career that no matter what happens, I am going to meet every single deadline. And so I have that's something that I'm actually really proud of, is that I've met every single deadline for, oh gosh, since 2014, I think. So 10 years without missing a deadline. So I'm very proud of that, and knock on wood that nothing ever happens. That I don't break
Right.
it now.
Well, that's actually very, very good. That's actually like a huge accomplishment and a huge achievement. And congratulations to you on that, 10 years and going forward. So from that first client and then now where you are in your life right now in your career, would you say that all the reviews that you've gotten from your clients has again validated your promise that you said in the beginning, that when you work with me, your work is protected. I'm going to make sure that this is the best version of your story that it can be?
Yeah, I mean, like as far as yeah, like their work is protected. Yeah, like I'm look, let's be honest here. I'm an editor. I'm not trying to pose as like a writer. So like
Right.
one of the things that kind of makes me laugh is that I will have sometimes authors come to me and say, "Hey, how can I know that you're not going to take my book and try to publish it under your name and act like you wrote it?"
Mm,
And I kind of, I'm always professional. I'm always respectful when I email back.
right.
But honestly, it has absolutely no interest to me. I am not trying to publish a book. I'm not trying to act like I wrote a book. I am legitimately so happy in my role as an editor,
Right.
that that's really all I need. Um, so yeah, no, that's a I don't know. I think that as far as the the reviews and the feedback since then, since I've been in business, I mean, like pretty much everything has been very positive. A lot, like all my clients love me. I get tons of return clients, word of mouth, and that means that I'm doing something right.
Right. 100%. And now we come to the first reflective question of the interview. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. And I'll give you a little setup, Kristen. So, just like authors, I would imagine being editors, it's a very long process, depending on like the project. You can have one project, which is like 9,000 pages, maybe it's a little too much, or like 900 pages, or two works which collectively are 900, and then they're different, possibly maybe different languages or maybe different genres, and trying to give all the respect they need and trying to do all the ads and trying to meet the deadline. It's a little bit intimidating, and again, that anxiety is like, am I going to finish on time? Am I going to make a good impression with this client? Because based upon your bio, you also work with, in addition to first-time authors, veteran authors as well, which I would imagine that's a little intimidating, because these people have built a repertoire of who they are in the publishing world, and then
Mhm.
trying to get their book out to where it's like the best version. There's that thing again, that anxiety in one's chest, just wanting to burst out, and then that voice in the back of every creator's mind, whether it's editors, writers, artists, whatever, saying this is terrible, they're not going to like this, they're going to say that you wasted their time and stuff like that. So I'm curious, Kristen, have you ever had those moments of anxiety or imposter syndrome? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to be the best editor you can be?
It's funny that you say imposter syndrome because I went through this huge thing earlier in my career, probably 2017,
Mm-hmm.
2018. Thinking, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. People are going to find me out. Um,
Right.
I just keep getting lucky. Um, like thoughts along that
Right.
lines. And so it was really tough for a while. I read a couple of books on imposter syndrome, and it's essentially like saying that it's a kind of like just all in your head. Like there is a reason that you are as successful as you are.
Mm.
There is a reason that people want to work with you, and not just for the first time, but for the second time, especially for the second time and beyond. And so I realized that and I thought on that. And I took a step back and I looked at all of my clients
Right.
who have hired me again and again. I have clients that I've edited 7, 8, 9 of their books.
Right.
Like, okay, like they're not going to keep hiring me. They're not going to keep spending money to hire me unless they believed in me, unless they really liked the work, my style of editing. Unless they really wanted to work with me. There are so many editors out there that, they have a lot of choices.
Right.
So yeah, so no, I really got out of that that mindset as far as imposter syndrome. And then I'm sorry, what was the rest of that? I latched on to imposter syndrome and like that was it. So what was the other part of that question?
Oh, no worries, no worries. The second part was, what has continued to discipline you to be the best editor you can be?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So I honestly 100% bottom line love editing books. I love reading. I'm a reader. And so to be able to edit books before they are published is such an honor. It's such a privilege.
Right.
And I know that it sounds cliche to say that, but it really, really is. I love what I do so much. It fills me up so much that I feel like I have the best job in the whole world. It's really awesome. And like let me be real for a sec.
Okay.
There are some books that I just can't get into. There are some books that, the writing style is really tough, and it's a lot of editing work. And in some cases, in books like that, I revert to, okay, how much am I getting paid for this? Because that's important too. I'm putting food on the table. And so in books like that, thankfully, they are very few and far between. Books that I don't really like that much personally, or books that are really, really difficult to edit. I kind of zoom out a little bit and be like, okay, how much money am I earning per page? How much am I earning to edit this page? And, just kind of get through one page at a time. So yeah, no, it can be difficult, but thankfully, for the vast majority of projects, it is legitimately, I love what I do so much. I legitimately enjoy every single book that I edit on some level. And I just I want to make these books, not to repeat myself, but I want to make these books the best they can be before they're published and before everybody else can read them.
Awesome. And that actually leads perfectly into the business section of the interview. And the first question is, which I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on, Kristen, is, so as a freelancer editor, I would imagine you've done a lot of research to like figure out, okay, what are like, how are other editors, making their rates? How do they build their brand? How do they establish themselves? How did they build their portfolio and so forth? So when you began, Kristen, were you shocked by like the amount of work that goes into building a brand for an editor, especially a freelance editor? And the reason I bring this up is that for the modern person, when they think of editor, they think of like, oh, it's just checking a few mistakes or making a few changes, but it's not. It's literally very different things. As you mentioned before, it's like you could be a copy editor, and that's has its own set of rules and stuff you have to follow. Developmental editor has its own set. So with all of those in mind, what was like the research mentality and the businesswoman mentality that you had to go into when building this brand of yours to establish yourself? This is who I am, and this is what I offer to you all.
Oh gosh. So it was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of work, a lot of research. Honestly, I loved it. I loved that part of building my business. Like I ate it up. And it was a long, long, long process. I never
Right,
actually sat and thought about like how long, it took me to do.
right.
I started my business when I was 22,
Mm,
and I remember when I was about 26, I think finally being done, finally feeling like I had like established myself um, in the industry, like at like for like a very base level
right.
of myself in the industry. So that's 4 years, and that was 4 years of very heavy work for
Mm,
me. Um, Building my website, writing blog posts on my
right.
website, um, and like SEO keywords,
Yes.
doing links to
Mm-hmm.
my own blog posts and then other blog posts, like external blog posts. So like
Right.
there was so much that went into it. And I mean, not even mentioning, the researching, my rates. Well, what am I going to charge
Right.
people? Am I charging people too much? Am I charging too little?
Mm-hmm.
There is so much that goes into it. um, and yeah, it was a very it was a long, very in-depth, invasive process for like 4 years, and even now I'm still not done. It has really slowed down, because by
Mm-hmm.
now I have all those things set up. I have my headshot pictures, everything
Right.
is are all set up. All my social media pages, the branding is consistent across all
Mm-hmm.
my um, so I mean, like all of that, took years and years to set up. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But I loved it. I really enjoyed that process.
I 100% have to agree. I'm still building, my brand as the Wandering Scribe and Wandering Quill, and I'm still learning about, keywords, certain words to help really get people's interest, logos, headshots, professional headshots, especially. It's not an easy process. I've been in it now for 2 years, and I'm still learning. But as you say,
Mhm.
it is a fun process because I'm learning new things. And speaking of learning new things, this leads now into the next part, which I'm really curious to see what your thoughts on this question is, which is the audience for a book that you're working on. And the reason why I bring this up is that, when working with the client already has an idea of who the audience is for the book, the language, the verbiage, if they have any special words, like if it's like fantasy, history, thriller, whatever. But I would imagine from an editor's point of view, looking at it, it'll be like, you may want to change the verbiage, or you may want to change a little bit of it because you are kind of going outside of your audience. So for you, Kristen, I'm wondering, have you ever had that experience where you're like trying to balance what the client wants, but also providing your own feedback for the client based upon what you're looking at in a project?
Yeah, yeah. So that has happened, quite a bit, where you have someone like me who is, an industry professional. Like
Right.
I have, this experience, like on top of my education, so much real world experience with, uh, you know, what is required for each genre. Like
Right.
you were saying, you use different tropes, different
Hmm.
plot, points, depending on what genre
Right.
you're working in. And so there have been quite a few times where it's like, okay, I tell the author respectfully, like, okay, I really like this about your book, but just so you know, it technically shouldn't be like this. Here's what I would recommend instead.
Right.
And whether that's changing the plot, or increasing the tension, or
Mm-hmm.
giving character, or
Right.
whatever. Um, but ultimately, my job is to give the author, the best of me, giving
Right.
the advice, giving, trying to give this book its best chances to succeed in whatever target genre it is, with the target audience.
Right.
But um, having having said that, the author is in the driver's seat. So
Right.
if the author wants to say thanks but no thanks to my
Right.
advice, ultimately that is up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm here to help them as much as possible, but ultimately it's their book. It's their
Right.
name book. So if they don't want to take my advice, I am totally 100% okay with that.
Right.
And in some cases, I have seen authors not take my advice, and then the book has really bad reviews.
Right.
So, it's just one of those things that's like, you have to pick your battles. Um,
Right.
you have to realize that, it's the author's book. It's not mine.
Right. Of
So,
course. Of course. And that actually kind of ties into the next one, which may or less be the same thing, but it may be different. And that, of course, is the readership. Now, the reason I bring up the readership is, in my opinion, it's different from the audience. Yes, as an author, you can market your book to a specific audience, whether it's fantasy, high fantasy, history, thriller, whatever. But ultimately, it's going to come down to who exactly is going to read this. I've had a lot of authors on the show who have said there have been some books that have been marketed, let's say, as young adult, but upon reading, you
mhm.
realize this needed another set of eyes to review and edit this because it's more so of the new adult and adult. And then you have books that are marketed as new adult and adult, but they are in the middle. So I'm curious, Christian, as an editor, what are your thoughts on sort of like these books really not getting like that second look at? And what would your advice be for authors who really don't know who exactly they're writing for?
Oh gosh. So that's kind of a tough question, because it can be hard to really realize uh, the story that you're telling. A lot
Right.
of authors are so close to their book that they struggle to see the forest for the trees.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, having an editor take a look at that is a really good choice. Another good choice is having beta readers
Yes.
in your target, your target audience group, read the book to kind of give feedback, like, hey, this doesn't quite feel like a young adult book,
Right.
or the this doesn't feel like a new adult book. It feels more like a full-fledged, like, adult book. Um,
Right.
so that definitely helps, having people in your target audience read the book before you have before you've even hired an editor is a really good choice.
Definitely 100%. And for my third book, I know I did beta readers and arc readers, and that was a huge game changer. I narrated that for my other two books. My other two books, I had them edited, but not to the best of their abilities. I had them re-edited by another editor in England who is phenomenal. She is incredible, and you can clearly see the difference. I have both of my books, one and two, and they are vastly different. It's like two different books, and
Mhm.
it's like, wow, this is what it actually feels like when you actually work with, an editor who knows what they're talking about, who gives feedback, who writes down, hey, in this chapter you may want to look at this on this page, or in this chapter this section didn't really make any sense. So it's really, really nice to have people like that in your corner that really help you understand how to make the book better. And speaking of that, Kristen, for you, who would you say has helped you understand the business and industry of being an editor? Are there any people you would like to shout out?
Um, you know, I wish I could say that I could, but when I don't know, maybe I was like really naive, but when I first started my business in 2012, I thought that I was like the only editor out there. And so like I swear, like I never actually um tried to find other editors
Oh,
in
okay.
like editing groups. I never tried to find editing groups for like I went like probably 6 years before I even knew that was like a thing. That like there were like
Right.
networking, opportunities. Um, and so I I very much built my business in a vacuum. I read a lot
Ah, okay.
I read a lot of books. I did a lot of research as far as um, I knew that there were some editors out there. I found their websites. I looked at their websites. I saw the services they were offering. I compared, okay, what does this service entail? Um,
Right.
so I did my research that way by like looking at what other editors did. As far as actually talking to other editors, um, I I did not start talking with other editors and like networking with other editors until like 6 years into my career. And
Okay.
by that time I was already like look, I was already I was already very much, part of the writing community. So I wish I could say that I had a mentor, um, just totally on my own. You know what? I did because I feel like it made me start such a stronger business person because of that. Um, it really taught me that uh, if you set your mind to something, and I know this isn't true for everything, but if you set your mind to something and you are absolutely determined not to fail, that's me. Um, uh, you can happen. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Okay, so as you were saying before, so when you began your business, you were doing it in a vacuum. You did not know or didn't reach out to like other editors until, much later after you established yourself, established your brand. And I'm actually curious because that actually now leads into the next question, which is, of course, legacy. And the reason why I bring this up is that, much like, first-time authors, we always have this notion that our debut project is going to be, the start of our legacy. And it's also what I like to call the twofold path, which is to be an author or to be known as an author. And now
Mm.
applying that to an editor's perspective, to be an editor and to be known as an editor are two very different things. I would imagine, in your opinion, Christian, that to be an editor is an individual dedicated to, the art of the English language, its complexities, trying to understand it, and building upon it to make the project be the best version it can be. To be known as an editor is an individual who's dedicated to that aspect, but also building their brand, being on shows or being on, other platforms, social media, blowing up their website and so forth. And both paths have their own, hurdles, trials, and whatever. But I definitely feel for a first timer in any industry, the second path is very enticing. But unfortunately, from an author's perspective, it doesn't really go well because, the long-term goals are going to be unrealistic. And we go back to an editor. Let's say you work on a project for a first-time author and you believe this book is going to sell loads of copies. This book's going to establish my platform as an editor. This is going to be the start of my legacy. But just like in the publishing world, in the editing world, there is no guarantee. Granted, there are, I imagine, some exceptions in the editorial profession where you have editors who have reached, award-winning status where they're known for editing New York Times best-selling books and their reputation is well known. But on the other side, just like authors, you have those who rise, fall, rise again, and fall down even hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, it comes down to this discussion, which is, just like an author, for an editor, there is no guarantee that your debut project is going to guarantee your legacy. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it is true. Nothing is going to come, on a silver platter. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this, Kristen. Like, what is like your response to like this discussion that in the editing world, no matter what project you've worked on, whether it's for a first-time author or a veteran author is your first client who has an established portfolio of books, that does not guarantee that your status as an editor is going to automatically skyrocket.
Right, right. Well, and part of it too is that like a lot of the books that become like New York Times bestsellers
Mm-hmm.
are published by traditional publishing houses, like the big five publishing houses in New York,
Yes. Yes.
um, which they all have their own in-house editors.
Right.
There was one book that I edited, a historical, a nonfiction actually, that
Ooh,
ended up
okay.
by Houghton Mifflin, I think. Um, and so that was the closest I got to like an actual, but like it didn't become a bestseller. So that
Right.
was the closest I got to, a book that I've edited being published by a big publishing house.
Okay.
But being published by a big publishing house is not the same as being a bestseller.
Right.
Um, and to take a step back from that, a lot of the vast majority of books that I edit are for authors who ultimately decide to go into self-publishing. Um,
Mm.
so the bestseller list that we are talking about in my realm of editing
Right.
are always like Amazon bestsellers,
Right.
or just books that are winning awards like indie book awards.
Right.
um, and so I've had quite a few. I've had I think right now it's just under 40 different titles that have become Amazon bestsellers or have won book awards, which I
Right.
think is absolutely awesome. I think is really, really
Right.
great. But that is not going to, necessarily catapult me to stardom.
Right.
And I mean, like, it would be cool. That'd be a nice little perk. but that's not really my goal. You know, my
Right.
goal is I am very, very happy. You know, I'm literally sitting in my home office. My commute, you know, quote unquote, is 5 steps down the hallway. Um, I am doing what I love, you know, and I'm making pretty good money doing it. I work from home, I set my own schedule, I get to work in my PJs if I want to.
Right.
So honestly, the idea of becoming this like super well known, like, you know, oh, she edited a New York Times best-selling novel. That'd be cool, you know, that'd be a
Hmm.
nice little, you know, bonus, but absolutely not necessary. No.
Right.
I'm happy where I am. But to kind of branch off on that topic for another
Mm.
second, I um, I just recently got a query from an author who is trying to write a memoir, and
Hmm.
she is she says that she is on the brink of homelessness.
Ooh.
She is in a very precarious financial situation.
Hmm.
She is hoping to write her memoir, and she is anticipating that her memoir is going to publish and hit it big, and it will save her from this, you know, financial
Mm.
predicament. And I told her, you know, I told her my rates, but then I said, investing money in publishing a book right now would not be a good decision,
No.
because there are so many authors who think that they're going to publish a book and it's going to, you know, become a bestseller, and
Absolutely.
it's going to make them millionaires. And
Right.
that is that it's a good story. You know, it's a
Right.
good, it's like a good dream to think
Hmm.
that. And it does happen
It does.
very, very, very rarely. Very,
Yes.
very rarely. And so yeah, there are a lot of authors out there who think that, you know, publishing a book is the answer to becoming an overnight millionaire. And it's not. It's not.
It's
It's a
not.
lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, not only writing and publishing the book, but also marketing.
Yes.
Just because you have published a book does not mean that people are going to read the book, you know, or buy the book.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's a really big hurdle that a lot of authors don't take into consideration.
Definitely. And also to add to that, sorry, just because your first book does not reach the status that you expected, it should not deter you from creating stories if that's truly your passion. As one of my guests said a year ago, it may be your seventh book, your 15th book, or even your 20th book that really gets your name out there and gets the fans that you're expecting. Because, as she said, when that happens, you can tell them, if you enjoyed this book, see 19 all the way to 1 and see my journey as an author, because then you get new fans, you get
Yeah.
new readers. And also that ultimately ties into this concept that another author said, which is, how do they say it? Oh, darn, I'm blanking on it, but it was a really, really good one, which is ah, something, it was on the lines of like, it doesn't matter if you have like, raw talent initially in terms of like, you're great at writing prose, you're great at writing characters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they were saying that if you are consistent in your writing, if you put in the work,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
raw talent becomes talent, expertise, or mastery. That's ultimately that they were saying, that as authors, we get better with every project we are working on. And I imagine the same thing for editors that with every project you work on, you hone your skills. You show people this is what I can do. I can handle the workload. I'm consistent. People know what to expect from me and stuff like that. And that kind of leads into this second last question before the final one, which is for you, Kristen, looking back on your success from now into when you started this journey, have you ever got a sense of validation from other editors you may have come across on social media or the webs or just in person? And the reason why I bring this up is that, like authors, whenever we get into this industry, of course, we want to create stories, but some of us want to get this little sense of validation from people we've admired and respected in the industry, because it's one thing to bring your knowledge that you've learned into an industry and show people who you are. It's another thing entirely when your peers see what you've done and give credit where credit is due. So I'm wondering if that's happened to you throughout your journey or even recently.
Yeah, so you know how I said at the beginning of my career when I was building my business,
Right.
I reached out to any editors, but I found, I don't know, I would say probably 20 different editors online. I found their
Right.
website and I researched, the services they were offering and all, all that stuff. One of the editors I really, really admired. I really looked up to her. But I never reached out to her. So like she didn't know who I was. She didn't know.
Okay.
And this was way back, probably, oh gosh, probably 2000. I mean, 2013, 2015 was when I was first, really, looking at her website, seeing what she had, what she had to offer. Um, and I built my website. I kind of launched. I started on my own. I kind of forgot about her, about the whole,
Right.
like looking at her website and stuff. Um, a couple years ago, so probably I would say 7 or 8 years after
Hmm.
I a lot of time, admiring her and admiring her website, she reached out to me and through my website,
Mm.
hey, I see what you're doing, and I'm really impressed with. I can't remember what she said exactly, but she was like, "How do you do that? And what would you recommend I do?" And I was like, absolutely
Oh.
mind blown because it's like this was somebody that I had looked up to, like 8 years before that, that she had no idea that she was reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I'm really impressed with you." That was such a validating moment in my in my career. Um, so yeah, that was definitely something that I'm gonna remember for a long time.
Awesome. And now we've arrived at the final question. And here it is, Kristen. So, with everything you've learned and still learning about the industry of being a freelance book editor, what is your word of wisdom to others who want to get into this business, into this industry? What would you give them as stepping stones?
I have I have gotten a lot of messages. I would say in the last several years, I've gotten a
Mm.
lot of messages from people saying, "Hey, I want to be a book editor. What would you recommend I do?" A lot of people mistakenly assume that editing books is a really simple, like, oh, because I like reading.
No.
Oh, because I like reading, I would be a good book editor. It is honestly, it is so much
No.
more. It's so much more than that. Thank you. I'm so glad that you that you agree with me. Because a lot of people think that it's a really easy thing, and it's not. Um, I would say that in addition to I got my degree in English and writing, and
Hmm.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot in college, but there was so much more that I learned on the job as far as editing books, like tenfold.
Right.
And so, what I would say to others wanting to become an editor is it's hard work.
Hmm.
It's not just sitting around and having books fall into your lap. It
Right.
is it's marketing yourself, it's building relationships with
Hmm.
authors, it's doing good work, it's meeting your deadlines, which
Yes.
is something that I learned early on. Meeting your deadlines, making promises, and and fulfilling those promises. Um, it is it's it takes a lot of dedication, and it takes a lot to realize, like, okay, I'm home. It's a Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and I I have no obligations. Like, I could literally go, turn my computer off and go watch daytime TV, and
Right.
clients wouldn't know anything. Like, there is absolutely no accountability. I have to be accountable. I have to do that. I have to
Right.
know, I have to keep myself on track in order to keep my deadlines. So it is
Mm.
not as simple as saying, oh yeah, I want to be a book editor, like, I'm going to do this job. It takes a lot. It takes a lot more than people initially realize.
Definitely. And also to add on to that, knowing what kind of editor do you want to be? Do you want to just be a copy editor? Do you want to just be a developmental editor? And also, are you going to focus on fiction books only, nonfiction books? Do you
Mhm.
want to be a textbook editor, or do you want to do like a reference book editor that you get for like colleges and universities? So there's a lot of other things. And also another big one, which we haven't touched on, but it is important, is separating your own biases from the project. And the reason, and what I mean by this, viewers and listeners, is that if you're reading a book that its subject material is something that you are not comfortable with or do not agree with, that is a really important thing, because if you are talking with the client and this is what you find out what the book is about, you have to say, unfortunately, I am not the best editor or not the right editor. You may have to go to someone else. But if you do take on that project and you know this book is going to make you uncomfortable, you have to be professional and try to separate your own personal feelings from the project, because it will probably definitely show in your feedback, in your responses. You have to be professional.
Yeah, exactly. So there have been a couple of times. Once when the author didn't tell me that there were some parts of this book that were problematic. He was talking about quote unquote uh, um, something about living politicians and burning
Mm.
crosses in their yard,
Oh,
them. So yeah, former presidents. So yeah, you could probably understand who I'm talking about. Um,
right,
which politician? And it's like, okay, this is something that is like, apart from being problematic in the sense of like the racism, this is
right,
something like is probably going to get the attention of, Homeland Security. And
right.
I don't want my name associated with this book. And so what I ended up doing was I had edited about probably a quarter or a third of his book up before that point. And I saw that scene, and there were a few red flags before that, but I saw that scene and I was like, brush my hands
Nope.
off. Oh, thanks. So I, I deleted the file. I did not deliver the edited material because I didn't want him to have that. I totally refunded him all of his money. All the time that I invested in the project, I just considered a loss. And I told him, hey, I am not okay with this project. You know, here's your money back. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it can be tricky. But apart from that, as long as the author is, you know, upfront about like,
Hmm.
hey, this is what my book, you know, this is the type of material that my book contains. You know, there are a lot of editors that won't accept books with sex scenes or
Hmm.
books with violence or books
Yes.
with, you know, like certain swear words or like,
Yeah.
you know, like there's a whole bunch of things that a lot
Right.
of
All the
editors,
trigger stuff.
yeah, that editors are just not, you know, comfortable with.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like I have a pretty thick skin, generally speaking. And so, like, honestly, like, I'm working on an erotica right now,
Oh.
which, you know, is actually pretty fun. So the author told me that her previous editor knew that it was an erotica, but after finishing the book, the editor said that the book was quote unquote shameful because it's an erotica. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, but you agreed to edit the erotica.
Right.
So I don't know. I just think it's kind of kind of interesting. I finished it, you know, I read the erotica. I thought it was great. You know, it was so it kind of underscores the importance of finding an editor that really appreciates the type of book that you have written,
Right.
and is really truly in your corner.
Definitely 100%. And this is a perfect ending to the very first episode of the September lineup. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Kristen, for coming on the show and telling us all about her services and her business and how she became an editor. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before we officially end, where can people find you on social media to interact with you or reach out to you if they have a project that they feel you would be the best editor for it?
So my business name is Kristen Corrects, like Kristen Corrects manuscripts.
Mhm.
So my website is kristencorrects.com, and that's Kristen. And my social media is all at Kristen Corrects. So pretty easy.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you all so very much for joining us for, as I said, the first episode of the September lineup. A huge thank you to Kristen for coming on the show. We wish her the very best on her journey and wish her continued success and another 500 books to be now 1,000 books. And if you're looking for an editor, well, here you are. Here she is. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as always, it's been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.